Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the Brian's Optik goalie pad review. So I've used these pads for about just under a year right now, and they're simply my favorite pads. So it's about time to do a review on these and actually talk about them. The sizing on Brian's is kind of odd. These are a 36 plus 0, plus 1. And as you can see, they're pretty big. They match up to my Bauer's XLs and my CCM 35 plus 2s. So this is pretty large for a plus 1. Just throwing it out there. The other thing about Brian's that I find kind of interesting or different is that these are the flies. So these are the butterfly version of them, where the flex has internal brakes and it's softer. This pad is still pretty soft. You can really bend it. You can actually feel the foams on the inside moving when you're holding on like this. This pad is not a stiff pad by any means. The boot's not horribly hard, but it's not it's not horribly soft, but it's not really stiff either. So it's kind of like an in-between. These aren't that stiff, and they're not really comparable to the 1X pads or the Supreme pads in terms of stiffness. I've seen these on retail shelves that have been people flex them, people wear them, people push it down on them, and they're much softer than these pads, and that's pretty quick. When I play, I am very careful with my pads to never push down on the top of them so they bend. If you watch Garrett Sparks play, I'm kind of similar. My kind of hand goes here on the glove, but it never pushes on the pad, so it bends it all. It keeps it totally straight. I kind of like straight pads. So I make sure my pads stay like that and I don't push them down at all. With that said, the stiff pad isn't that stiff. Just a heads up, I would tell everyone to order the flies and then break them in the way you see fit. If you want to flex them more, do it. Just because I think the flexes, the thigh rise could be a little too soft, and over time, especially if you push those down a lot, I'm not totally confident that puck would stay out with them with the thigh rise. This one isn't super stiff as it is, and the flex just gives you a little bit more. I think you can work these in to have a nice curve on them if that's what you want. So I would always tell people to buy the flies. Now with that said, I kind of showed that off. The other thing about this pad is a couple companies talk about torsional flex. It's talked a lot on genetics. And these pads have kind of warped a bit from wearing them, and I'll show a camera angle that you can actually see for that. So these pads do bend like sideways. So it's hard to do when it's not actually on your foot, but the pads definitely do bend a bit sideways. And I'll kind of show it in that other angle where you can see the pad kind of bending. Like I said, these aren't super stiff pads. They're stiff, but not very stiff. Like nothing compares to the Bauers right now and stiff premieres. So rebounds on these pads are kind of, again, in between. They're not Supremes. They're similar to 1Xs, but they're not. They're better rebounds than, say, E-Flex, the SLRs I wore, and a bunch of other pads like that. So they're not totally deadened. The boot is actually has quite a bit of rebound, but up here is not totally deadened. Part of that is the way Brian's makes their pads. You can see there's no binding on here, so you can kind of push in the front graphic because there's no binding tying it down, keeping it tight. So you do have a bit of give there, which does give off a little bit of, or softens the rebound a little bit. I wish these were a slightly more harder rebounds, like the Supremes and 1Xs. I like the pucks to really go out there, but I don't really have complaints with these, and I'm totally happy with them in that regard. Just they could be a little bit better. I don't know if that's really possible to do with the way Brian's makes their pads though, without doing like massive overhauls. Optik has a really tiny outer roll. The reasoning behind is they say that you don't really need an outer roll anymore. I'm not sure if that's totally not true. I have had a couple pucks hit here and kind of feel like they roll over, where a roll might have kept them in a little bit more, especially an angled roll like the Vapors have, where it's angled like this, so it kind of angles it in and not just a normal roll. the way that these are made, and I'll kind of bring it up closer, show that off. This is kind of recessed in the front of the pad. All right, so I mentioned before how it's softer. You can kind of see how the thigh rise dips in the side here, and it's not totally straight. Again, that is just because the pad is pretty soft. You can also see I mentioned how the outer brake is actually built into the pad. So you can kind of see here where the brake isn't just like a little piece on top, it actually goes down the side, right? So the core of the pad kind of goes there, and then the brake comes in and it kind of joins on the side, or joins into the side, I should say. So there's a few pads that don't bend like this. Mainly the Bauer Supreme and Vapor don't bend like that, and they both have thin thigh rises like this. The Premier series doesn't bend like this, and I think the E-Flex doesn't bend like this as well. I can't totally remember on that one, but Vaughn pads bend like this. You can see the Brian's pads bend like this, and Warrior bends like this. Vaughn and Warrior quite a lot. Basically, what they did at least compared to CCM, is they went for small or thinner cores on the inside, which makes them softer, which makes you be able to do that. It gives you more lightweight. So that's kind of what the companies are doing. I wish it was a bit stiffer, just from like a durability standpoint. And I like how kind of the Bauers feel in that regards, and they feel more solid. I haven't had issues with the Bryans, but it's a concern of mine on pads like Vaughn and Warriors. So I wanted to mention it on these as well, just for consistency. So the other thing that's kind of interesting is, if you look at this pad, and you can kind of see it on this angle, the inner knee sticks out further than the top. And it's kind of evident when you go like this. It's much more evident in person, so it's kind of hard to show off. This is how they are from the retail ones I saw as well, so this isn't a wear thing, it's just kind of how the pad is. I'm not sure if this was on purpose for a design. You look at the back of the pad, it doesn't really look like it would do that. But once you actually get into the front, you can kind of see how like this part kind of sticks out. When I've watched gameplay footage of me from the front and photos, this does look totally sealed flat, and actually you can kind of see it's totally sealed flat when it's on the ice. So it's not like it's on an angle or anything. So it's pretty interesting on why that is like that and why it looks like that. It's something I wanted to mention. Also, this pad you can kind of see it being a bit softer. Like you can see it flex a lot. One thing I notice is when I'm standing up totally straight, let me see if I can get this, the pad kind of flexes like this, or when I stretch out against my pants. You see that in Vaughn pads. Matt Murray's pads do that in the past. I haven't had that with the Bauer pads. It's kind of because this is softer. But I want to bring it up. I haven't had issues with these, but it's something that I want to bring up. And if I did totally stand straight with these, it would totally flatten out, and it's kind of odd. I mentioned the torsional flex. So this pad does flex, as you can kind of see right here. It's not like, it is what it is. I feel that when pads flex like that, they feel more connected to your leg and more like an extension of your leg compared to a box. I know of many people's complaints about the Bauer, the Vapors and Supremes, is that they do feel pretty boxy. And they don't really feel connected to your pad or leg and work with your leg. This torsional flex kind of helps work with your leg and make it feel more like a connection on your body, and it's not like a box. But again, I want to bring it up. I don't know what I really prefer, because I really like the 1Xs, but I like the strapping in this pad better, and I like the sliding in this pad better. So I can't really give an answer on that unless we put those features or these features in this onto the 1X and compare it that way. But again, I wanted to bring it up just because of like the thigh rise isn't totally straight, and it is pretty soft. So it's not a totally stiff pad like others on the market. So while we're nice and close right here, I do want to show off the wear. So there is wear on the top parts. So this is on their Optik slide. Can't remember exactly. Primo material, sorry. The Primo material, that's from its rubbing. It happens. Some outside there, again, a big thing. The mat does show quite a bit of wear right here. This is actually from a door, so it's not from normal wear in a game. I closed the door, and this was kind of stuck in between the door and the frame. Whoops on my part. But again, if I were to, I would kind of try to avoid the mat on the edges. just because it does wear a bit. I keep it mainly just for details, not like big pieces on the sides. Again, just giving you a heads up of material types. So another point I want to bring up for the Optik is the seal for the thigh rise. Now these pads aren't that bad with it, but I have seen pads in the retail environment that are pretty bad. So if you touch the thigh rise, the pad kind of tilts. Now these pads, again, aren't bad with it, but the retail ones I have seen, like the boot does come up a bit here. I'm not sure if it's because these are broken in or what, or if just how retail customers sometimes screw around with stuff. There are a couple pads out there that are really awful for this, where basically, in order to totally seal the thigh rise, the boot has to be up in the air, or the pad has to twist. Warrior Rituals are pretty bad at that. These, like I said, I've seen retail ones where this isn't very good, but it's really solid on mine. Another reason I bring this up, I have had pucks slide under this thigh rise. It's sealed, but there's not a lot to it. So you can see how thin the thigh rise here is. If you look at Premier pads, it's much thicker. E-Flex, I believe, is thicker. Now 1X isn't really much thicker, but because it's a harder base, it's harder to jam pucks underneath. I find with these, because you can kind of see how you can kind of bend it, I have had pucks slide under my thigh rise when the pad wasn't totally sealed. Now again, you can say, okay, well, seal your pads. These are one of the best sealing pads on the market, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you're in movements, now these aren't a total square boot either, which I changed so I could get a more aggressive stance. But when you're in movements, this definitely comes up, and I have had pucks slide under there. Now again, if you get a 90-degree break instead of on the boot, instead of what I got, that won't happen as much, but it did happen to me, so it's something I want to call out. I think a thicker thigh rise would be nice there. Again, these aren't the strong, like hardest. So it probably seems like I'm actually don't really like these pads and it's pretty negative, but it's not really true. These are my favorite pads I've ever worn. The Primo sliding and their new Optik slide, which has no bindings all the way through. It's only right here, but it doesn't really get touched because of how thick this is. This is the best sliding pad I've ever worn, and I've worn basically all of them. This is the best. The next is the Supreme and 1X. But this stuff is better than that is. And you can hear this material sliding, which I always think is kind of interesting. You can kind of hear it doing its job. I don't know how to put it besides that these pads slide better than any other pad I've ever worn. And that's one of the reasons why I bought the Genetic, is because this is integrated in the Genetic. This pad is simply the best sliding pad I've ever worn. It's a huge props to Brian's in that regard. Another thing I want to mention is customization on Brian's is ridiculous. I guess I should show this part. I did different materials here just to show off slight differences. I did it on the Genetics as well. But to show those, normal Gen Pro. I meant to put carbon, white Gen Pro here, and I forgot. Carbon, flat, carbon. Just so you get kind of that different look. I think this looks really good because you have the matte, and then you have the carbon, then you have the normal Gen Pro. It gives a little bit of color and a little bit of texture without being over the top, and it's very subtle. I kind of like cleaner pad designs, as you can kind of see with this. It's not over the top, but I do like having those little details. The other awesome thing about Brian's is stock. So these are blue, would have been blue, and these would have been red stock. Or, sorry, these would have been red and that would have been red. I wanted it, again, to be clean. Brian's is really easy accommodating that. So Brian's is awesome for customization. There's basically no one who really competes with it in that regards on a retail level. So huge props to Brian's for that, and I really like them for that. Also, this flap I had custom put on. Normally it's removable here. I kind of like larger knee pads, and I wanted a little bit extra flap. In all honesty, I could take this strap out and have no effects. It doesn't really do anything. It's not really tight. But I keep it there just for peace of mind. It'll probably come off in the future. I also ordered that strap on my Genetic just to match my Optiks. One other point I want to make is you can kind of see how this sticks out, like the sliding surface here sticks out from the face, but it doesn't really as much on the thigh rise. I wish the thigh rise was as hard as the rest of the sliding surface, just so it would seal a little bit better. I think that would help a little bit in some of my issues. This is me nitpicking because these pads are great, but I'm just bringing it up. Another thing, I love the Primo on the toe. It's thicker. It feels like a thicker material than normal Gen Pro, and it definitely feels like, it does wear, but it definitely feels like it's going to last longer than normal Gen Pro does as well. Again, there's wear on the tips, but that's about it. Next, we'll get into strapping, which is, so one strap out here, and then there's Smart X strap system. I originally hated this because it's honestly kind of annoying to get on. Because it's the three-way, it's just like, I can't really ever get it straight on, maybe because it's my fat legs. So it takes me a couple times. This is, again, me massively nitpicking. This works well as a faux professor strap because this locks basically your knee in place. It's not as good as the SLR professor strap, but it's very good in that, and I love it. It's just a nice system. It's all customizable. It all has a different adjustability here. You can even cut the straps off if you want to. Now, in this tab is for knee pads. I don't wear the knee pads, so I don't put them in. Attach it there. I wear knee pads in a different way. I like the ecstatic on the inside. Just gives it a little nicer feel. The nylon here is good for less wear. Can't stick on stuff, and it's for lighter weight too. There's a little bit of padding here, not a ton. The knee block, I haven't had an issue with padding, so that's all good as well. Now, I'm going to get to the part that makes these pads, I feel like they're almost cheating. I mentioned earlier that these pads seal better than anything else, and what I mean by that is this pillow is basically cheating. It's now very comfortable, but when this is on the ice, your calf and leg is raised by this pillow, and what that does is it kind of acts like really extremely loose straps, which you can do, but what it does is even when my leg's like not all the way down, because the pillow has that gap, it will push the pad down with my leg in there, and it will seal, like this will seal when it's like that. So basically when I'm sliding and my knees aren't totally driven into the ice, this part makes the pad seal on the ice, and it's unbelievable how well these pads like seal the ice in terms for that. Now I mentioned my issues with the thigh rise, and I wish it was a bit thicker, but this, like no other pad I've worn is close to this for getting your leg down. Premiers are like the next tier where it's almost like that, but I feel like Premiers do it in a different way where they're kind of heavy and they just droop and they have the round medial roll, which is this, where these still feel very light and they still, like this part just drives the pad down all the time, and it's unbelievable. This pad basically brought out my issues with the 1X where the strapping I couldn't really get the strapping loose enough without just using one strap to act like this. So I kind of want to pull this pillow out and take it with me in different pads to get that effect on it, because it's so good for sealing the ice and it works so well. So next I want to get to the boot really quickly. So these pads include the Smart Strap. So it's the toe strap, just like this, which again, it's pretty straightforward how a toe strap works. And the boot strap. I like boot straps because I find it anchors the pad on your foot. I had to use it when I wore tight straps on the Vapors because the pad wouldn't come back. With that, it kind of acts as like a pivot, almost like a pulley system where your skate moves and it kind of just slides along it. So I don't mind the straps with that, and I'm kind of a fan of it. I love the use of the Primo material here for wear instead of just nylon. Good job on Brian's that. Now, if you buy these pads, I suggest you get one of these straps. Now you can just go to any luggage place and get a luggage strap that works as well. These just elastic or Velcro, go through this little loop, and that way you can carry them. I think Brian should include this with every single pair of pads because this loop is a great idea, and this is much easier to carry, and you don't really wreck your pad straps by doing so. So great idea for Brian's for this. They should include them. I get why they don't for money reasons, but it should be there. I think that's about it for these pads. Now, this review might seem like it's negative and I have a lot of issues, but it shouldn't be taken as that because these are my favorite pads and they're the best pads I've ever worn. My nitpicking complaints are only things I wish were slightly different to make them even better. They are kind of soft. I do wish they were like stiffer across the face, and I wish the rebounds were a bit more. But when I need to win a game, I put these on, and I put the catching glove on, and I generally play better in these than anything else. They slide more consistently than anything else. They slide better than anything else. They're not the lightest pad on the market. I believe my 1Xs are lighter than these. I know Warriors are lighter, but these are a full 11 inches. The 1Xs are as well. But these just play more as a... Like the 1Xs still kind of play like a little bit of a box. These play more of like almost a traditional pad, but that comes from the softness of it. But these are amazing, and I would not hesitate to recommend these to everyone. In fact, I always tell people to try them on and pick them up. Again, they aren't the lightest because like they do have some extra straps, and like they do go kind of over the top with the detail. Like Gen Pro down here weighs more than if you just use nylon, but they're the best pads I've ever worn. That's kind of the only way to put it. All my criticisms are just of ways I wish the pad were slightly different to make it a little bit, in my opinion, better and like almost perfect. I like these so much that I went out and bought a set of genetics for my Tigers team. So that should kind of answer how much I'm a fan of these Brian pads. And the catching glove as well, I absolutely love. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully I covered everything on this. Again, these are my favorite pads. I want to go into a lot of details in them, what I like, what I don't like. So hopefully it was informative. Now, I hate to say this. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Links are in the description. As well as if you ever make a purchase or don't make a purchase on a piece of gear because of one of my videos, please reach out to the manufacturer and just mention it to them. That way I kind of get on their, get noticed by them, and that way I can get gear so I can do reviews like this and talk about equipment. So thank you very much for watching. And again, comments, let me know. Take it easy.